This week we welcome Leumas back from Chanted Down. This is another swapcast. This time we dove into the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark is something that has captured our attention for time immemorial, another one of these things. And as you'll hear, there's not that much really that we know about it. There's just some stories. However, sorting fact from fiction, as always, is the interesting part. I really enjoy sitting down with Leumas. This is our fourth podcast together. Don't know where we're going to go next. However, check the back catalogue for Leumas and give him a listen on Chanted Down. I really enjoy his podcast. This was a cool episode, something different. And however, it's interesting how we can draw parallels because of the tiles on the mirror ball. It's all the same. I think it's all part of the one story. And if we open our minds and see that it's all connected, that'll help everybody. That's it for me. Chanted Down's on Patreon as well as Unlocking the Code. In these weird times, I know it's interesting. However, if you could swing a couple of bucks our way to continue the show, that'd be awesome. I have got some things to say. However, I'm going to leave it for now. Going to use Leumas. I love his song, Detoxify. So we'll lead in with that. Thanks very much, everybody. Be cool, be kind. We'll talk soon. Cheers.
There's a poison in destruction. People suffer, people suffocate. We're suffocated daily, making our own bubble. Subtle is the cuddle of the snake that squeezes. Hate to see this matrix seizes. Maybe we just need to pull the plug. Drain the system, poison out our body. You've been probably overdosing most of your life and never noticed. Overloaded, rub the cups and comatose. And no one's open, no emotion, no engulfed in this dimension here. We work all day and it's always a thinking crystal clear. Everything we do revolves around the dollar count. It's all around us, all around. We're falling down. It knocks you out, get off the couch. It's all think out the top of flame will cost you cancer, jobs and houses all around. Got your spouses, got your house, you call the council, got no answers. Evolving out in small amounts. It's all we have, it's all planned out for our defeat. Water down the modern man and bottle up. So we have no intuition of a vision that it's all corrupt. I know we read our vision, get foggy, always been forgotten. We're sick of our thoughts and living in boxes. Now let's go find all of those outreaches, forgotten the beaches to walk on the treetops tomorrow. All pieces are part of us. Go find out what's been making you take, but didn't face it with criticism. Awaken your inner vision. Slow back down, you better leave your belongings. You'll start receiving your callings and be unleashing from bondages. Draining it out, every day is about a way to get out. Find a solution, life illusion, portrayed every day in our face. We do what they say, they use us away. Pollution can take, inducing our brains. We choose to escape, to do what they make, You wear it on your face, I can see the burden on your shoulders heavy. And it's getting unrelenting, you're fouling from how hard the world strains you. It stresses, depresses, confess. It's just a system that's a hope that puts you in scenarios you never chose. It's not your fault that every known element in your life has been controlled. Everything but not your soul. So this can be some therapy, some psychedelic clarity. Don't fight between polarities, go where it will not go. Slide between the barricades, it's nice to be aware of things. It's kinda like some kerosene, lighten up the world. It's a poisonous system, you didn't invent this prison. So who'd you be when it's all out? Everything you think needs to go now. Defeat the people that hold down you from beating you, blow out your brain cloud. Become new and escape now, take Route 86, escape now. Gotta lay down, everything you learned, everything you know, everything they ever told you. Drain the poison from your soul. Bringing it out, draining it out. Every day is about a way to get out. Our minds are polluted, find a solution, life illusion. Portrayed every day in our face, we do they say. The uses away, pollution can take, inducing our brains. We choose to escape, do what they make, do what they make. People beyond. People beyond. Waking up to the people we need to be. 2004. Beat by Cumulus.
Shocking eruption of great electrical energy. I feel connected to all living things, to flowers, to some special spirit, and even to some great, unseen, living force.
Welcome back, everyone. We're back with Leumas. We found some time in the daytime this time, mate. It's actually light where I'm talking to you now. It's normally the dark when I'm talking to you, but we found some time, and we've been bouncing back and forth. Unfortunately, the subject matters that we want to cover, there's too many, right? We could just, if we had the resources, we could just sit in a bunker and research till the end of time. Hey, Leumas. But
yeah.
We decided a little while ago, we piqued our interest offline, I think it was, about the Ark of the Covenant.
That's right.
And so we had a discussion offline. In the last couple of months, we've been bouncing back and forth. And here we are, the Ark of the Covenant. It's a very mysterious one. Obviously, we all love Indiana Jones. However, we thought we'd deep dive, but it's not really that deep of a dive. That's probably one of the most interesting things about it. However, why don't you kick us off, mate, and tell us about the origins of the Ark, and I'll chip in with some information that I've picked up along the way as well.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, mysterious subject, and I really liked digging into it, and I was like more, and then I hit a bottom.
Yeah,
and I
you
think
don't go any further. Yeah.
No, I don't know if there is a place to go any further, but there is leads in different directions that I just don't know where to go. But as always, when I approach a subject, and especially something out of the Bible, I have to look at it like this too. First of all, I was like, did it really happen? Was it real, or was it symbolic? Are we looking at an allegory here? And I couldn't find anything like that, but I just always like to ask that question anyway, because I like to stand things on their head and check it out. And I'm pretty positive it was real, but we always should ask the right questions. And we have to remember that Moses had written this book, but Moses also was said to have written Genesis, which we know is just an older telling of our earth story with the Sumerian tablets. And so that right there, you do have to wonder. And then there's a hypothesis out there too, that Moses could have been Akhenaten. And not to derail
who was Moses?
Who was Moses? Yeah, was he? Akhenaten might come into this. So I thought I would just throw that out there before we begin, just to think that possibly he could have been the one who left Egypt, rather than this Moses character.
And I think you touched on something there as well that I brushed up against it. As with any research, and I know we research similarly, there's rabbit holes and branches that pop off, and it's hard not to go down that rabbit hole. And Moses was one of those interesting ones. And you got to, now that we know more about the Sumerian text, and we know more about just the general story that's been repeated and repeated and repeated throughout time, and it's really just a story about a story about a story, which is the real story, right? And who was Moses is a very, very interesting question. However, you even go to the 10 Commandments with Moses, right? On the temple in Sinai. He's talking to an acacia bush. Now, me and you both know what the acacia bush is, and what the acacia bush, a burning bush, right? And even the Jewish scholars now say that Moses was probably off his dial on DMT when he got the 10 Commandments, right?
Right.
So, is that him talking to another consciousness, right? And then actually in my version of the research, other consciousness does come into it with the alternative theories. However, the Ark, like you say, in the Bible, but it's not just the Bible, is it? It's the Kabbalah, the Bible, the Hebrew texts, the Israelite stories, the Ethiopian stories, right? The Ark echoes through every single one of those things in multiple ways, which is interesting. But where did you start with the Ark, man? Where did you start?
Well, now you were showing a picture earlier, and I just thought about the description, and it's interesting that we talked about DMT because it was constructed out of acacia wood. So you have, there you go. So it was constructed out of acacia. It's about 3x5, and it's plated with gold. And Yeah. So, and it's got these carrying poles
Mm-hmm.
and uh the two cherubim on top. So
Mm-hmm.
we got and the flame that would come out of the middle of it. I mean, it's a really bizarre thing when you think about a lot of
It's very
the
bizarre.
yeah. Wait, sorry, I pressed the wrong thing. Yeah, there uh there's that. And then also let's see if I can find, hold on, I get out of the screen for a sec.
You're right, mate. So while you're doing that, so we've got a picture up, and just so
Yeah.
it gives a good description, right? So this is from Exodus 25, 10-21, right? 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, 1.5 cubits high. Now, I've converted those measurements. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. Made from acacia wood overlaid with gold within and without. The
Yeah.
cover of the lid is pure gold with hammered gold cherubim, right? So it's like two little statues, I suppose, right? And they look like they've got wings or flames. They called the staves which carried the ark were made of acacia wood, but the whole thing was made of acacia wood. And again, what does acacia give us? Acacia gives us DMT.
Yep.
Theoretically, it contained the stone tablets, right? So the Ten Commandments, but it had some other stuff in there too.
Yeah.
They called the middle between the cherubims the mercy seat, and it was all made of gold, right? The cherubims, the wings extended over the mercy seat. Cherubim face each other toward the mercy seat, made from pure gold, beaten and attached to the ark covering. That's a lot of gold, man. That's a
Yeah, it
lot of
is.
gold. And I worked with gold for a long time. I worked within gold for a long time, and it's one of those things that, I mean, theoretically, the Israelites carried this thing across the desert for 40 years, right? Gold wouldn't put up with that. I wonder, you know what I mean? Gold's a very soft metal.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So I don't understand how they could carry it around for that long. But it's interesting, man. It's interesting. Where were you going to go? Did you find your notes?
Well, that's just to, yeah, I did. And well, you just described it really. They, yeah, the two cherubs face each other with their wings wrapped around their bodies, but we already know that. But
Mm.
this is something that kind of, so you talked about, it's like, how would you carry that all the time? According to the Talmud, which is the Hebrew Bible,
Mm.
the space occupied by the ark did not take up space. It took up space, but didn't take up any space at the same time. And also that the people who carried it, it carried them. It's kind of
Mm.
it's very strange how it carried them rather
Mm.
than them being, laboring to carry this huge heavy thing. It was like somehow it carried them. It like lightened their feet. But one thing that's in there, so we have the 10 Commandments
Mm.
supposedly broken in there, and a staff of Aaron, who's Moses' brother,
Mm.
that could turn into a snake,
Mm-hmm.
a jar of manna or manna.
Mm.
I say mana because mana is the spiritual energy in the Polynesian culture. So I always
It
hear that a
is,
lot
isn't
here
it?
in Hawaii.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so I
mana,
always think
mana.
of
Yeah,
mana,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
manna is what they call it. It's a starch that came from the sky. That's how millions were fed in the desert for 40 years wandering, and that's very strange.
It is very
That's
strange,
what
right?
is this stuff?
What is this stuff? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had, yeah, Aaron's rod.
yeah.
Um, rod, walking sticks. It's basically, and look, you see it actually. Ra behind me up there is carrying what you would call maybe an Aaron's rod, but it's got a head of Anubis on it. Okay,
Oh, right.
um, but it's the shepherd stuff. It's the one that goes up and hooks around. You see it in a lot of the biblical texts and the biblical pictures, but you also see it in a lot of hieroglyphs. You see it in a lot of Egyptian hieroglyphs. You see it a lot of in a lot of Sumerian drawings. You see a lot of in East African drawings. Now, it's supposedly just a shepherd's staff. However, we got it. It did perform two miracles, Aaron's rod, apparently, and one of them was drawing water from a stone. Okay,
Oh, wow.
and Aaron's rod is the staff that split the Red Sea. Okay, that is the literal story.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting that that is Aaron's rod that split the Red Sea. So the rod thing's interesting, right? I mean, we come back to, is it mythical? Is it literal? Right? I mean, what are
Mm-hmm.
we actually talking about here? I mean, not to give it away too early, but was the ark technology? Was the things within the ark technology? Um,
Well, it's a good question.
you
Yeah.
know, because how did a rod split the sea? Okay, so that's how they got away from the Egyptians, right? Is that Moses stood there, split the Red Sea, allowed the Israelites through. Once the Israelites got through, the Pharaoh's men chased them, and then he released the rod, and the sea descended upon the pursuers. Okay, that's the biblical story,
Yeah.
right? And that was Aaron's rod that did that.
That's interesting.
And that rod is represented, like I say, it's the shepherd's staff. It's the staff you see. Well, actually, hang on. When you talk next, I'll grab Ra Dan. We can actually I've got a
Yeah.
representation of the
Yeah.
staff.
Okay.
Um, but the mana's interesting, man. What's your take on the mana? I mean, that was, as you say, it's some sort of starch based thing that literally fed them for 40 years. Okay, it sort of
Yeah.
reminds me of, for want of a better description, the gruel in the Matrix, right? You know what I mean? It's like it had obviously had enough vitamins and minerals and whatever else to sustain these people every single day for, in theory, 40 years. Now, what are we even talking about there? Like and I knew the mana was spiritual, and then you said Hawaiian. I'm like, yes, yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Is it one and the same, right? So now are we talking about energetic versus spiritual? Like, this is the question. It's an interesting one, man.
It is because it fell from the sky, apparently. But just back to the rod a little bit, I just wanted to say something. The rod is an echo of another story across the world that I just reminded me just as you were speaking. When I went to Machu Picchu, the where you fly into is Cusco, and Cusco was the center of the Incan Empire, and how they found that this place was going to be the center of the Incan Empire is a certain important person. I guess it would have been a chief. I'd have to look it up. Had a rod made of gold,
Mm-hmm.
and it went into the ground there, and that's how they knew that they would build their civilization, Cusco, right there.
Mm.
So it just reminded me of that's kind of an echo across the of the world on a totally different place.
Well, it all echoes, man. I mean,
Yeah.
what anyone that wields magic has what? A staff. Okay.
Right.
Doesn't
That's
matter
true.
what story you're thinking about, right? I mean, here's old Ra. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And there's his
Yep.
staff. Okay.
There it
There's his
is.
staff that he's holding.
Yep.
All right. Now Ra sits over the studio and looks over us, right? However, because he's the god of all, right? He's the
Mm-hmm.
sun god. But
Yep.
all of these gods, regardless of culture, okay, even if you go back to Greek myths, pagan myths, what is the one thing they have in common? They have the staff, the magical staff. The magical staff did this. The magical staff did that. Okay, Merlin's magical staff is a story that echoes as well,
Sure.
right? So
Even Hollywood has a holly wand, a wand, a magical wand. That's what they're saying,
exactly,
right?
right,
Yeah.
Hollywood, right,
Yep.
and
Hollywood.
Hollywood, and what's the one thing as well? I mean, when we see these monotheistic priests from doesn't matter which denomination, when they're walking down their thing with their big tall hats, and we can talk about symbology, but probably not today. What's the other thing that they're carrying? They're carrying the staff, right, which is a representation of Aaron's rod. It's interesting, man. It goes back to, are we talking literal or are we talking spiritual? Are we talking physical? Are we talking leftover technology? Is that what we're talking about? The question has to be asked, man. The question
It
has to
should
be
be
asked.
asked. And speaking of the Egyptians,
There you go.
ancient Egyptians had arcs
I'll
of
put
the god
absolutely.
of the gods, and they carried around on carrying poles too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the Ark of the Covenant, Noah's Ark, right? I mean, the whole Ark thing it took me on a bit of a trip as well, because it's like, what are we talking about as far as arcs are concerned, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
meaning of the word ark, the meaning of the word covenant. Okay. So covenant actually has to do with bloodlines and stuff like that, which I've got another theory about that as we move forward into alternative theories a little bit later on.
sure.
But
Yeah.
theoretically, so I mean, according to Exodus, right? So what have I got here? God sends Moses and Aaron to talk to the Pharaoh to plead for the slaves' release. When the Pharaoh asks to see a miracle, he has cast the rod down and it turns into a serpent, like you said, right? So, do we call that a third miracle? Right? So, it splits the Red Sea, draws water from stone to allow the Israelites to drink, but also at command, it turns into a serpent, right? Um, but the interesting thing is here. So this is the text, right? The Pharaoh's sorcerers cast their own rods, creating serpents, right? So Moses and Aaron had a rod, turned it into a serpent. Then the Pharaoh's uh, sorcerers did the same thing. Okay, but then
Oh, wow.
Aaron's serpent devours them all. Okay. This is an apparent warning before the plagues of Egypt. So this is the other thing too that we don't. The whole idea with the ark and the serpents and the rods precedes the plagues of Egypt. Okay, which
Yeah.
is one of the reasons that the Pharaoh goes after the Israelites. But there's no question that they stole the ark from Egypt. Okay, that's part of the story, right? Um,
Yeah. And that's the part that you filled in on another
mhm,
show we did that really
yeah.
kind of blew my mind. I never thought about that before.
Mhm.
And it makes sense because even Tutankhamun, the in his had some of these boxes in his chamber, some of these arcs.
That's right. There is representation of arcs across multiple cultures. Okay, Ethiopia is a very where the arc supposedly is and ends is actually in Ethiopia.
Right.
But we can talk a little bit more about that.
We'll get into
Think
that. Yeah.
think about the arc though that lends to technology, right? So let's leave the my theory. I want to sort of finish with that theory because I've got some measurements. I did some other stuff to play with that. Okay. Um, it being technology, yeah,
Yeah.
because this is so ancient Israelites. So when the Israelites were building their empire, okay, when if they were losing, what they would do, and this is again direct out of the ancient Israelites, marched the ark into battle and brought whole cities to their knees. Okay,
Yeah.
so basically they would march the ark into a middle of the city. And look, we've all seen Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay, don't open your eyes. Okay, the Nazis opened their eyes and they were all killed basically as soon as they took the lid off the ark. Right.
Yeah.
But again, in the Kabbalah, in the helmet, in the Bible, in the Hebrew text, in the Israelite text, in the Ethiopian text, this is echoed and echoed and echoed, right? That the ark had the power to either bring people to their knees or give out spark or flame or something, right? Which is what is this thing, right? It's not just a gold box with rocks and a piece of wood in it. You know what I mean? And some mysterious substance. The ark was so sacred that touching it meant instant death. It was the words from the Israelites, right? I
Yeah.
mean, what, what is this thing, man? Like
There
it's
was
weird.
this, I never really knew the history of this, but Yom Kippur is a Hebrew holiday, right? And only the high priest was allowed inside the ark only once a year on Yom Kippur when he would enter the Holy of Holies and perform the annual service before the ark. That's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, what are they doing, right? I mean,
Right.
whereas the Ethiopian side of it is there's only one priest that even the high priest of the Ethiopian Orthodox is not allowed to see the ark. There is only one priest that ever allowed to look after the ark, and it is a virgin monk, as usual, that is never allowed out. Right?
Yeah.
That
Right.
monk's job is to look after the ark. And you sort of go into Graham Hancock's theory that it is a power source, that it is some sort of energy source, because these monks wear heavy metal chains that prevent them from a type of radiation poisoning. It's a weird thing, man. I you know. So where did
It is weird.
So the ark went missing. Theoretically, the ark resided in Jerusalem until the 6th century BCE, okay, before Common Era. Or maybe just say BC because we're dealing with the ark before Christ. And then when Babylon sacked Jerusalem, the ark disappeared. Okay.
That's the last you hear of it. Yep.
It's the last you hear of it. There's another story about the Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon. Okay. I mean, the other thing, King Solomon's temple, there's another rabbit hole there, man. The temple of King Solomon is basically, it's megalithic architecture. That's where the Masons start building the Temple of Solomon. Okay. The Masonic texts go back. The first lodge technically was built outside the Temple of Solomon. But those Masons came from Tyre, which is just south of Baalbek in Lebanon. Right, and we all know what Baalbek is. There's a whole nother rabbit hole there, man, where it's like these Masons had access to the old technology, right? Which comes back to, is this technology? And then there's the Temple of the Solomon was built to house the riches of the planet. And there's a whole nother story about that there's riches of the planet that are passed between generations. And yeah, theoretically, we're in the exchange of those riches now that control the planet, which is, we could start ranting about that, but we won't do that today.
We will. Well, we can, but you know what? I just want to go back a little bit before.
Let's go back. Let's go.
When the Exodus was happening,
and take us back to
they
Exodus,
went to the Jordan River. Right. It stopped. Supposedly the ark stopped the Jordan River from flowing so they could cross. This is just another sea crossing, just like the Red Sea. I mean, what that's all about. And then, so when they did go to battle, they circled Jericho 7 times while blowing horns and then crumbled the stone walls. Well, I got into that and I started thinking, wait a minute, where have I heard that circling 7 times?
Yes.
And then I went, oh, yeah, the Muslims walk around the Kaaba 7 times.
7 times, yep. Blowing horns.
7 circumambulations around the Kaaba. Yep.
Which is that,
I don't know if
that's just weird too, that big black box, man. The big black box in the middle of the school. It's just a weird thing.
We could do that could be a whole show right there.
We could do that one as well. I mean, what is that? What is that?
What is that?
What is that? What's the big black box?
What's in there? What's really in there?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, and that derails this a bit, but still, it's like that's a mystery in its own. Why is that place so special? Like, I mean, I know a little bit about Islam, but not
a lot. No,
I could learn more, but it's like, what is that all about? So, but yeah, so we went. So the Israelites actually lost the ark when they conquered the conquering of Canaan, and the ark accompanied them, but God said not to do that. So they took it, the Canaanites, I think it was, the Philistines, took the ark back to Ashdod, their capital city in the south of Canaan, and where they placed it in the temple of their god Dagon, which I've heard that name before too.
Yeah,
Dagon's
another word. Dagon's
right?
Another word,
yeah. The next day, however, they found the idol fallen on his face. After replacing the statue, they found it the next day decapitated with only its trunk remaining. And soon afterward, the entire city of Ashdod was struck with a plague. The Philistines moved the ark to the city of Gath, and from there to Ekron. But whatever city the ark was in, the inhabitants were struck with a plague. After 7 months, the Philistines decided to send the ark back to the Israelites and accompanied it with expensive gifts. The ark was taken back to Beat Shemesh. I don't know what that is, but
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, that's a little journey it took before
So
we never
back up.
saw it again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sure.
so back up. So it was the invaders that circled the city 7 times, sounding horns, and then disintegrated the city walls, and then they took the ark. Is that what you're saying?
No,
Well,
no, that was
so
that
the
was the
Israelites did. The
Israelites.
Israelites did
Yeah,
that, but they ended up
yeah.
losing, and they took the ark.
They
I
got too
mean,
cocky with it. They
yeah.
and then when they went to battle with the Canaanites or the Philistines,
Mm,
which is south of, I guess, I don't know, Canaanites are different, but
yeah.
anyway, they went
That,
there and they got cocky with it, and that's when they lost it. Yeah,
mm,
because
comes
apparently
back
God
to
didn't
didn't like
allow
it.
it. Yeah,
Comes back to, is this thing some sort of energy weapon, right? So,
right.
because I mean, how do you disintegrate walls, right? And the sounding of horns. I mean, we've got when we and look, we do this a lot, don't we? Right? When because we're picking pieces up of the jigsaw puzzle out of the ether. Yeah.
Yeah,
You would write in the Bible or these stories. Remember, these stories are written so we can understand them, right? So the sounding of horns are we talking about uh, audible devices, right? Vibration, sound, in order
yeah,
to crumble walls, because that could do that, right? If you have a big sound thing, boom, that will disintegrate stone at a certain level. But this thing had multiple uses, this ark, right? So you got to remember it stopped the rivers of the Jordan.
yeah,
Uh, it split the Red Sea. The ark, well, the rod was drawn from the ark, right? And then the ark and it's the same thing, like you said it in South America. And if you think about it, what's the other? How do you activate the staff, right? You bang it on the ground, okay? That's
mm-hmm.
what activates the staff. That's what split the Red Sea, right? But it was drawn from the ark, right? So what are we talking about here, right? And the other thing that the other common thing the ark has is plague. Okay, there seems to be
Yeah,
those that aren't meant to have the ark suffer plague. And the other one is, and this is a little bit some more information for later on, but where the ark is said to be kept seems to be a hotbed for UFO UAP activity. Um, so
mm-hmm.
again, lends to, are they trying to find the ark? What's going on there, right? Are they trying to retrieve it? Is it a power source? Is it a thing, right? So yeah, so the Canaanites send it back, and
Yeah,
then the Babylonians come and get it. Well, no, the Babylonians don't get it. Babylonian, and then the ark disappeared. But there's a story. The Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon in the 10th century BCE,
yes,
and had a son, by Menelik. Menelik's another one of those names, right? Uh, Menelik then returned to, once he was of age, went to visit King Solomon. Uh, Menelik wasn't real happy about that. And Solomon wasn't happy about that and sent Menelik away with some Jewish scions, okay? And they took the ark to Axum. Now, where I'm pulling this stuff from, this is the Kebra Nagast. Now, this is the Ethiopian national story, still to this day.
oh, that's
Uh,
very important.
yeah,
Yeah,
very important, right? The Ethiopian, this is their story. This is that they believe, okay? Um, Now, Menelik took the ark, and basically, same story again. He used the ark to build the Ethiopian empire, brought cities to their knees, would use the ark as a weapon. It's described in a couple of different ways: sparks, flames, smoke, light, but as some sort of weapon, man. And actually, I've got a new word for you, Loomis. I know how we like new words, right?
okay.
Apocryphal, and that's spelled Apocryphal. Apocryphal. Okay.
Well, okay.
Now, because when I went and started reading through the Kebra Nagast and the research on the Kebra Nagast, this researcher said that the story is known to be apocryphal. I'm like, what is that word? It's an interesting word. I like new words. Now, apocryphal means of doubtful authenticity, although widely circulated as being true. Now, that's how they consider the Kebra Nagast. Then I thought of doubtful authenticity, although widely circulated as being true. Is that not modern society?
Yeah,
We're
yeah, that
apocryphal, mate. We're apocryphal.
yeah, that's where we're at right now. We're in that age of apocryphal.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
find a way to use that word, man. That was a little tidbit of like, what is
I should
apocryphal
probably
mean?
write that down. Oh, I'll
Yeah,
listen later and get it. Yeah.
Apocryphal, apocryphal. Yeah, because and isn't but what that reminded me of too? Not just the fact of modern society, but isn't that the whole? Isn't that every one of these stories? Oh no, it's not real. What they're saying is not real. They're just making it up. Yeah, it's been their national history for the best part of 3,000 years, but it's just a lie. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
It's all good, man. Why would they believe in a lie that's 3,000 years old? You know what I mean?
yeah. No, it's nothing to worry about. Go back to sleep.
That's right. It's just a lie, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all ceremonial.
Just go watch TV.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Well, here's something. So you did touch on this, and I thought I would just add to it.
Yeah,
Now,
please.
you mentioned Freemasons, and this is interesting because King David was not allowed to build a temple for the ark, so his son was allowed, but his son hired from the King Tyre, right? King Tyre of
Yeah, King of Tyre. Yeah.
sending a guy named Hiram Abiff to work on his
Yes.
temple,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And
like
Hiram is the
apparently this
father of the Masons. Yeah.
Yep, Haram Abiff was full of wisdom and understanding,
Mm-hmm.
but he was murdered by three guys because he wouldn't give the master masons this password, which is very interesting. And his body was buried under a sprig of acacia. Again, you got acacia there,
Acacia, man.
and his password was lost forever.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is initiates to Freemasonry, they have to play the role of Hiram Abiff to be initiated. They have to be this man.
Yes.
So this is their mascot, and it's said to be a fictitious character, but I'm not so sure about that. I mean, again, like, why would this be carried for so long? And what are we supposed to? Another name for him is Hira Abi. So
yes,
I don't know.
In the Masonic text. So I didn't realize we were going to go here, but I've got some Mason. My grandfather was a Mason. He left me some documentation. I actually have the original story of the Temple of Solomon that I've read out on the podcast a couple of times. Cool. Yeah, it's to remind me next time. Okay, we'll do an aside. Okay, and I'll read the text to you because it's interesting. But he's known in the Masonic text as HAB, right? Because in the Masonic text there's all these code words and gaps. And he's known as HAB, Hiram. And yeah, even the Masons say that they're not real sure. There's no real proof. However, yes, he is. And you know the acacia sprig? So when my grandfather passed, okay, whilst I was had a fair bit of grief, the critical thinker in me noticed the Masons in their robes. They used a handbag, you know, the thing with the thing, right? It was made out of wood. Okay.
Yeah.
They put an acacia sprig on his coffin. And they put a square of cloth on his coffin as well. And it was a complete ceremony that they did before we took his coffin away. And acacia sprig was part of that. What I would say is the handbag, the big thing with the square, right? Because I'm looking at it from the side. It was just a basket, but that's what it looked like. An acacia sprig and a square of cloth. And if you go back to when Hiram was buried, theoretically, that's the same procedure. That's what they did, right?
Yeah,
It does all go back to that, man. I mean, and who was the king of Tyre? I mean, he is mentioned, like the king of Tyre, and Tyre itself is one of those ones that I want to come back to, because I knew nothing about Tyre until I got these mysterious Mason documents that I probably shouldn't have.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know anything about him. I'd like to learn too. But that's weird that he went to the grave with this password that's been lost forever. And these are what the Masons play the role of. Every single Mason, even if they're just a low-level Mason that never knows what the fuck's going on, to a 33rd degree Mason, they all play that role of Hiram Abiff.
And Granddad was 33rd degree.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
He knew his stuff. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
It does all come back to those, because part of the reason the Temple of Solomon was built was in order to house the ark, to protect the
Yeah.
ark. And look, we don't. The Temple of Solomon's another one of those ones that probably deserves more research. We don't really know too much about that. I think they've found the footprint of it. But by all descriptions, it was a massive megalithic temple, right? It was huge,
Yeah.
built of unbelievable size stone and stuff like that. So then you've got to ask the question, like you just said earlier, how did they knock these temples down, right? How did that
Yeah.
happen, right? I mean, remembering that cannonballs and gunpowder and explosives, as we understand it, were not invented till 1700s, 1700s, right? Through
Right.
fireworks out of Asia, okay? As an aside, the bat guano wars is an interesting rabbit hole if you've never looked in that one.
I have not. No.
Well, the original source of gunpowder was bat poo.
Oh, yes. I have heard
Yes,
that. Yeah.
yeah. But there was wars, guano wars is what they called them, because guano is bat poo, and yeah, there was whole wars fought over guano, for caves of bat poo, because that's where gunpowder was derived from until they figured out how to do it some other way. However, how did they bring these temples down, man? How did they get inside you know, a, a, a 10-meter thick wall that was 100 meters high? Like, how do you do that with no cannonballs, how do you
They
do
had
it?
technology. They
Exactly.
had major technology, and I mean, just on a like a just a practical level of thinking, how is the God of love and the God of the universe um associated with like this device that seems to kill people, give plagues? It just doesn't seem like the loving God that I would know or you would know when you get in touch with nature and you go out on, that's not that it seems like foreign technology. It doesn't seem like
Yeah.
something that came like the God of the universe wouldn't need to even be in a box in the first place,
Mm.
so there's a lot there that that I stop on and I go, I don't know about that. But you know, when the last we know of the ark, like you
Mm.
said, is when the Babylonians came in and invaded Israel. And what is interesting is the Babylonians were um, very bureaucratic, right? So they documented. They're very anal, and they documented every item taken from the temple, but they didn't document any ark. So I find that very interesting. Now maybe they just like, oh, let's not say we found this thing, but
Mm.
there's a lot of theories on where it went. And just to add to back to yours, I just want to throw this in before we go forward,
Mm.
is I've done research on, I'm sure you have too, on some of the megalithic stones inside the Temple Mount today. If you go
Yes.
underneath it, there's
Yeah,
some
massive
giant
stones.
stones
Massive stones. Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
almost rival Baalbek. So
Absolutely they do, yeah.
yeah,
At the
yeah,
base
they
of the
have holes
Western
in them
Wall
too.
and all that sort of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the Wailing Wall. Yep,
yeah.
yep. So there's something to go by, and that probably was the first temple or part of it.
Yeah, and there is definitely megalithic understanding. So where I went, because Graham Hancock, The Sign and the Seal, is his
Mm-hmm.
book.
Yeah,
I haven't read that one, but I
me
have
neither.
got a pre-see. I've read a lot of Graham's stuff, but I haven't read The Sign and the Seal yet. And I
Me
and I
neither.
was gonna download the audio book for this podcast, and it was 32 hours. And I'm like, I don't have time for that.
No.
But long story short, he says he followed the story as far as the Ethiopian, the Kebra Grass story. So if we're to follow the Ethiopian story, because it's really, this is where it ends, right? It either ends with Babylon or it ends with Ethiopia. So I'll end it with the Ethiopian. Then I thought what we could do was I've got 10 alternate theories that we could talk about, right?
Sure.
Or a bit more than, a bit under 10. So Ethiopia's medieval kings were called the Solomonic dynasty, claimed direct descendants from Melanic, remember, who stole the ark and used it to build the Ethiopian empire, and Solomon. which ruled until 1974. Okay, this is not, this is, 50 years
Recent
ago.
day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Um, I must admit, Loomis, I was like, I wonder what the Americans needed with Ethiopia to ruin the Solomonic dynasty. I don't know who took over Ethiopia, but I just maybe I, it, you know,
Who knows? Yeah.
who knows,
But,
right?
mm,
So the ark is said to be kept in the Church of Mary in Zion, which is an interesting term,
sure.
which is in Axum to this day. Okay, not even the high priest can enter the chamber where it is kept. Its sole custodian is a virgin monk who cannot leave until his death. Right. So basically, his job is from birth to death is to look after it. In the Ethiopian Orthodox, each of the churches has its own tablet, which means replica of the Ark or tablets of the Ten Commandments. Now, I bought the tablet up. I'll just share screen so you can have a bit of a squeeze at it.
Sure.
And the tablet is the thing that houses the Ark, right? I mean, look at these big square headdresses that these guys are wearing. That
Oh
is
yeah.
the representative of the tablet. And this is Ethiopian Orthodoxy. Um, and that is supposedly every single Ethiopian church has what they call a tablet and a replica of the ark within their churches. So it's like, oh yeah, it's just a story, but maybe it's not, right? If every single Orthodoxy church in Ethiopia has a, that's a hell of a story to follow on with. You know what I mean? Like this is, we come
Yeah.
back to it's all just bloody religious, and that's basically where the story ends, either with Babylon or with Ethiopia. Because no one can see it and no one can verify it, it remains a mystery, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. End of podcast. That's where the arc ends.
All right. Goodbye.
Yeah. See you, mate.
We're all done. The end.
Yeah. Um, and that's what when we said this at the start, where it's like there's a deep rabbit hole that doesn't go too deep. That's it. Okay. But then I thought, with my friend DuckDuckGo, I thought I'll look into alternative theories because, interestingly, old Google didn't give me much, which is I always find that fascinating. Why?
Yes.
Why? Okay. If Google is restricting your search parameters on certain things, it's like being fact checked on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, right? You should lean into that. You know what I mean? There's probably some
Yeah.
truth there.
Yeah. I'd say so.
So did you come up with any alternative theories? Because I've got a few that we could discuss.
Well, sure. Now there is some places it could have gone. Well, Ethiopia strikes. Actually, let's go back to one thing that I forgot, and it
You're
and
right,
it
mate.
will apply right here. Where did I put that? My notes are sort of a mess. So apparently there's possibly two arcs. That's another thing. I don't know if
That's
you
one
ran
of the
into that.
theories. Yeah, there is.
Yeah, that
There's
there could
multiple
be
arcs. Yeah.
two. Yeah. And some people say that each tablet of the Ten Commandments was put into one. So according to one opinion that and the Talmud, the tablets were together in the ark, but according to another, there were two arks and each contained one set of the tablets. And so when I think about that, maybe Ethiopia got one, and there's a possibility, as people have looked into, that they could have used the River Nile to transport this ark all the way down to Ethiopia. I mean, it's going to go, it goes right there. These monks that guard it with their life, they have they lose their sight because the thing in there is so bright that their pupils are like burned from it or something. It's kind of crazy.
And they suffer some sort of look like what Graham's. That's part of Graham's research. He said these priests that are even just around the ark, they don't get to see it or touch it, but within the church that it's supposedly kept in, they go blind. They have what would be described as some sort of radiation sickness. You know what I mean? It's a weird one. It's
very weird.
Yeah. Multiple arcs was one of them. One of them is ET origin. Okay.
Where's this at?
It's an extra. The ark is from an extraterrestrial origin. Okay.
Oh, ET origin. Yeah.
And so Moses didn't talk to an acacia book on Mount Sinai. He talked to an alien spacecraft who gave him the ark. But But
It's
look,
possible.
anyone that's done DMT, you do talk to somebody.
Well,
Yeah, you're talking to some alternate consciousness from somewhere. So,
you're
you know,
peering into another dimension. I
yeah,
know you
that's right.
are. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Maybe it's the devices of extraterrestrial origin. Um, it was a communication device because there's multiple stories, and that comes out of the Kabbalah and the helmet as well. Uh, it could communicate with unknown people, God, in inverted commas. Uh, when active, an image of God would appear between the two cherubs known as the mercy seat. This is said in the Bible. It is always said that when it was activated, like we said, sparks, flames, smoke, bright lights, um, potential holographic device was one of the theories, which if you take the versions of the text from multiple angles, what was this thing? You know what I mean? It had some sort of power attributed to it.
Yeah. I mean, enough that they would have to wear a suit just to handle it
Mm.
with a bunch of stones on it. And I think it was, let me just double check here. I think it was like 9 stones. Oh, it was 12 precious stones. So they had the breastplate of judgment with 12 precious stones. And it actually looks like the Kabbalah. It's the same shaping of the Kabbalah. You could make it out in there anyway. And so gold, as you know, is supposed to protect yourself from radiation too.
Yes.
So
I mean, that's why was it built out of gold? What is it
yeah.
being, what's it protected? Um, the other one, it was a mana machine. Now this was a full a full paper done by George Sassoon and Rodney Dale. Um, the Israelites survived 40 years by eating mana. We talked about mana before. Using the Kabbalah as their source, they're saying the Ark housed a nuclear powered machine that produced some sort of algae. Um, the gruel from the Matrix or whatever, however you want to interpret that. They even said that, the seventh day of rest was to rest the machine, and
Oh, interesting.
rebuild and clean the machine. Now, this is a proper paper done by Jewish scholars. This is not, someone casting stones, as we like to say. This is actually a paper submitted by Jewish scholars that they believe, or Islamic, sorry, Kabbalah, so it would be Islamic, nuclear powered machine that produced mana. Weird one. I don't know. It was an electrical capacitor, that the cherubs were positive and negative. There was some sort of power source,
Yep.
which, that's not difficult to believe, potentially. This was an interesting one because this one was 1981. Okay, so this is, like I said, this story, this arc has captured our attention for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Yes, the 1981. They built a tunnel searching for the Ark, right?
Yeah, yeah, good. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Rabbi Yehuda Meir Seitz or something like that secretly tunneled under the Western Wall in 1981. However, he was stopped. Obviously, people noticed he was digging a big tunnel. And he said to the day of his death that he was just 40 feet away from the Ark, that it was buried under the Temple Mount. And
Yeah.
no one, and they basically, I don't know what happened to that tunnel. They probably cut it off, and no one's allowed to talk about it, which is what usually happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
again,
that could be another place it could be. It
yeah,
could be at the Temple Mount still
yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah, it could still be at the Temple Mount. I mean, who knows? Did they complete his tunnel? Right. I mean, it comes back to what's in the big black box. Why do they walk around the big black box and get a bit freaked out about it all?
Oh
With the
yeah.
Islamic tradition. The other
Yeah.
one, and this was a weird one that I didn't really put much into, but that apparently a secret code was found in the remains of the Temple of Solomon in 2015, and the Israelites and the Islamic faith apparently fought about it. That someone stole the code, right? And it comes back to what you were saying before, the code with Haram and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I didn't put much stock in that until you said that they wouldn't give him the code. I'm like, oh, I probably should have spent some more detail on that one.
Well, it could be that. It could. Yeah.
Could be, could be. Axum, we already went through Axum, which is, it's at a church of Zion, the Church of Mary in Zion. The other one is, we talked about multiple arcs already. There could be 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, if these things were power sources, which we're going to probably finish off with, yeah, I mean, there could be more than one, right?
Yeah.
I think it goes without saying that it was some sort of dangerous weapon. In all of the texts, it says that it could do things. However, there's one, and this was another theory about the Ark of the Covenant, because Covenant sort of has to do with bloodlines and stuff like that. Now, there's the 12 rows bloodlines, okay, which are feminine, okay? So we've got to remember, too, that it's always the masculine and the feminine, right? Obviously, the church only talks about the masculine now. That's one of the things. They deleted the feminine out of our existence, which is probably half the reason we're in trouble. However,
yes.
there is the feminine side to this, right? So there's the 12 rows bloodlines, and then there's a theory that the covenant is not a materialistic thing, but if it is a materialistic thing, it is the ark that's represented by the materialistic, which is the masculine. However, the feminine side to this is the 12 pure bloodlines of the 12 roses, and these are the feminine bloodlines that date back, the pure bloodlines of prior to the chaos, prior to the cataclysm potentially, or prior to Christ, but basically it talks of their feminine side, the bloodline, the healers of France and Europe, and these women, we would probably call them, certain sects of society would call them witches now, and they were healers, and they converted to Catholicism or Christianity to stay under the radar, and those bloodlines theoretically have been kept pure since then. And that it's at the Roslin Chapel in Scotland is the other place that the Ark may reside. And that was the Templars.
Yes.
The Templars. Yeah. It ended up with the Templars. The Templars took it from France to Scotland when they were ousted, and they buried it under Roslin Chapel. And there's all sorts of weird things that have happened at the Roslin Chapel in Scotland. A lot of UFO sightings, a lot of weird spiritual stuff, a lot of, I think there's been, sightings of Mary and all these sorts of weird things happen at the Roslin Chapel.
Yeah. So the Knights Templar may have taken it from the Temple Mount and then discovered it, and it was taken to France at Chartres Cathedral. And they, I guess, on a pillar inside that one in France, it shows them transporting what looks like a chest in a wheeled vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people think that from there it was taken to the Roslin Chapel in Scotland. One thing that Indiana Jones got right is the Nazis really were searching for
Absolutely,
it. They actually went to that French cathedral looking for it. They never found it.
They never found it. Well, did they? Did they?
No, well, we don't. Yeah, that would make sense. That would make sense with a lot of their technological advancements, wouldn't it? But I think they were even before they were. I think they were already technologically advanced before. So I don't know, but that's an interesting thought.
Hitler was obsessed. Hitler was obsessed about the occult and these stories of ancient technology, and he literally sent people around the globe trying to find this stuff. And that's the thing. What did he find is a fair question, right? I mean, what did he find? That's a whole nother podcast there, I would say.
I would say so, yeah.
So what piqued our interest, or what piqued your interest, and basically spurred this entire show, was a theory that I came up with that turns out, look, it's one of those ones where you pull it out of the ether. And okay, so the ark, so Moses and Aaron stole the ark and ran across the desert for 40 years, right?
Yeah.
Now the Pharaoh sent everybody after them. That's the story. and the Ark is technically a power source. Okay.
Yeah.
What if it powered the Great Pyramid? Now, in order to put this into perspective, I thought that I would look at the Ark size. Okay. Now, it was for your listeners, it's 50 inches by 30 inches by 30 inches is the size of the Ark. Okay. For my listeners, that's 1.27 meters by 0.76 by 0.76 meters. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the king's sarcophagus is 198 centimeters long by 68 wide. So the width, I mean, it's only 10 centimeters. The reality is we don't really know how long a cubit is. It's only our best guess. Okay.
That's right.
So, but in theory, could the Ark fit inside the king's chamber sarcophagus, which is not a sarcophagus, as all of our listeners know?
Yeah.
Maybe, man, maybe. And why would
Yeah.
you react like that? Why would you, if a bunch of slaves escaped, right? And it wasn't all the slaves; it was just the Jewish slaves. It wasn't,
Yeah.
Why would you send everybody after them?
Yeah, you're just like, oh, whatever. We got other slaves. We'll just yeah, fuck it. They can go. We
Yeah.
don't have the energy to chase them.
That's
No,
right.
they took something important.
They took something important, right?
To dedicate trying to cross the Red Sea.
Yeah.
All the way to there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All the way to the Red Sea. And then Aaron's rod split the Red Sea. Let's not forget that, right? Which was within the Ark. I mean, and that sort of lends the other thing, when you open up that line of thinking, you are very versed in the megalithic stuff as I am, Leumas. What is the one thing that is missing from all of these sites, man? It's the power crystal or the power generator, whatever makes these sites work. And, and they're all on the ley lines. They're all on electromagnetic lines around the globe. What's missing is the power source, is the thing that activates them.
Yeah, because I've been to these sites and we talked about it before. They're dead. There's no energy there that I could make. Like I could pretend to go, ooh, maybe there is, but honestly, I didn't feel anything there.
Mm. And what's the other story that's echoed around the globe, that buried in different spots around the globe are these power sources, right? There's theories about that down under here. Maybe, man. I mean, the thing is, like with these mysteries, is that we both know that we know nothing, right? So we're just presenting information that we've found. No one really knows. So could it be? I mean, these arcs seem to do magical things, man. You know what I mean? Like that, and it's not like it's just one part of the Bible. There's a whole section of the Bible, a whole section of the helmet, a whole section of the Kabbalah that is dedicated over and over again. The entire Ethiopian national history there's a whole massive section dedicated to the amazing things that this Ark could do.
That's right.
It's interesting, man. So yeah, from a measurement perspective, does the Ark fit inside the king's chamber sarcophagus? Maybe.
Yeah, and if there were multiple arcs, then we have sarcophagus things inside the main three pyramids. I went in the second pyramid, which is the pyramid of Khafre, and there is a supposed sarcophagus in there. But if this was for a king and somebody really important, it would have hieroglyphs all over it. It would be, it would look important. It's just a box. That's all it is. Just a box that could easily, you could put anything in there. But it's very possible that there were multiple arcs. They stole one of them and it went across the Red Sea, and that's what pissed them all off.
Well,
Turned off the pyramid.
Turned off the pyramid. I mean, that would cause a bit of a reaction, right? I know what we're going to do. We're going to turn the Great Pyramid off, and we're out of here, right? And we're going to go for it. We're going to take off across the desert. I mean, and again, there's multiple stories of this thing producing food, causing light, giving them warmth. Like there's the Ark did all of these things for the Israelites when they were stuck in the desert for 40 years, right? And you go back to the Ten Commandments, the acacia wood. These are all symbols that are echoed and echoed and echoed throughout time, right? And we would be remiss to ignore the joiners, right? What joins these other things together? It's it's fascinating, man. I mean, I must admit that I'm very happy that we got this podcast out, but I'm
Me too.
no further to understanding what the Ark was now. It's still a mystery to me. You know, and I wonder, it's one of those things. Will we ever know? Okay. I mean, if you watch Indiana Jones 4, which I recommend everybody to watch with a critical eye about the story that Spielberg's trying to tell there, okay, and whether or not that story is true, because it's about crystal skulls, and that's a whole different side of research. However, you know, when did the Nazis find it? What did they find? Is it now? Does the Ark now exist in a box in some warehouse in America, right? Because they stole everything from the Nazis with all these ancient tech. Is it in the Vatican?
Yeah.
You know, trying to pair truth from fiction out of these stories is very difficult. But it's hard not to say it was some power source. It's hard not to say it was some piece of technology, in my opinion. I mean, where do you sit with it now?
Well, there's a few more locations it could be, but the Temple Mount, always kind of like coming back to that a little bit. There's a no-fly zone over the Temple Mount. You're not allowed to fly over there. But what happened in 2011, as we probably all know, is a UFO was captured lowering down right at the Temple Mount, and it stood there for a while, and it flashed, and then it shot right straight back up. And that was in 2011. You probably remember that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And then maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the Ark, but if we're going to go on the ET hypothesis and go, did it come from ETs? Are they searching for the Ark there? You know, I mean, who knows? I don't know. Maybe it's not even ET, but it certainly was otherworldly. And they captured that UFO from quite a few different angles. It wasn't just like one
No.
person making
Yeah, I wonder
computer
where the
hoax.
video of that is. I wonder where the video, because I remember that. It hovered it hovered over there for a little while, and yeah, it flashed and then took off. But I
Yeah,
mean,
it's quite shocking.
so you go
Yeah.
to the Temple Mount. There is, you know, the pyramids is another one of those hotspots for UFO sightings. The Roslin Chapel is another hotspot for UFO sightings, right? So, you know, how many coincides do we need? You know what I mean? Before we start joining some dots together.
And
That's
Ethiopia, right?
an
Too.
Ethiopian Axum. There's,
You were
yep,
saying that. Yeah.
absolutely, right?
Okay.
So there's four, okay?
Yeah.
So now we've got four locations technically where the Ark is supposedly at that are hotspots and hotbeds for UFO sightings, and legitimate UFO sightings that have been seen by many, many, many people. These aren't, you know, as you say, computer generated hoaxes going back to as long as time immemorial, right? I mean, this is a story that's another than one of these stories that echoes. So then, is it an extraterrestrial device, man? You know what I mean? Are they searching for it? You know, is the beam that hit the Temple Mount a scanning device? You know, like, for want of a better description. You know, these, you know, and it's fascinating. I always find in these conversations that we have, Loomis, if objectively we're saying some pretty crazy stuff, however, join the dots, man. You know what I mean? Like, it makes sense what we're saying.
It does.
You know, what is this thing? And therefore, then that begs the question: who are we? Where are we? Are we an alien ant farm? You know what I mean? These things are very fascinating, mate.
It really good. It really pushes you out in all these different directions because it could mean a whole lot more when we're talking about biblical things, ancient texts, origin stories having to do with this device, megalithic sites. I mean, there's a whole lot lined up like that that we all need to know. I mean, I was going over it on my last podcast talking about what is the greatest truth on earth, and I was talking negatively about flat earth because I think flat earthers I think it's a psyop personally, but they think it's like the greatest truth in the world. I was like, no, one of our greatest truths is all this history and our origins of where we came from. I mean,
And
that
who we
really
are.
is
Yeah.
our missing element right there. That's the greatest truth we could possibly really come up with. You know, why are we all different? Why are our pupils different? Like our our eye colors are a reflection of a different sun, some people say too. It's really interesting, you know. Are we star seeded, you know?
Well, we are star
Uh,
seeded. We are star seeded. I mean, within our soul, within our bones, is literal space dust. There
yeah.
is a compound that they've identified as space dust that exists within us all, within the Homo sapiens sapiens. I don't know whether it exists in monkeys and apes and stuff like that, right? I mean, that would be. I don't know that question actually. There's one for later. But I know within humans that within our bones there is literal space dust. We are not from around here, or there's a part of us is not from around here.
Definitely.
And you know, these questions, these things. I mean, this history has been hidden from us, right? And you know, there's been the great awakening and the great reset and the great quest for control that we've talked a lot about over the last 3 years, Loomis. And part of this, and you know, the reason that we do this is to try and unlock the code, pardon the pun, to this story, because it has been hidden from us. You know, I mean, you know, I've still got the tablet. I mean, these Ethiopian priests wearing arcs on their head. You know, that is the like what possesses you to do that, right? It's not just some religious. Obviously, it is some religious thing, and they have a great belief about it. But why would you do that, right? I mean, you know, these questions need to be asked. You know, what is going on with this stuff?
And these discussions need to be had by people that are more intelligent than us too, like right, like people that actually probably, if they weren't indoctrinated by left brain scholastics, they might actually be able to get somewhere farther than us. You know, we're just people interested in the mysteries of Earth. But yeah,
we're
think
sophomaniacs, Loomis. You know, a sophomaniac
we think we're smart, but we're not.
That's right. A sophomaniac is someone who has the delusion that they're intelligent. Yeah, that's us. But yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, that is the end of the show. I don't know where else to take it unless you want to have a.
Well, I have a couple of things that there's a couple more locations that some people think it might be.
Yeah, because I didn't come up with any others. So enlighten me, sir.
In Japan, there's Mount Saruki, and the Shinto religion does a ritual that involves a large box that they carry up to the top. Now,
really,
what is that about? I don't know. So some people say it's in Mount Saruki. So we got that. That's a possibility. I mean, you just don't want to rule anything out in such a strange mystery.
Have you?
And then there's
just sticking with Japan for a second.
Yeah, stick with it.
Have you looked into the megaliths of Japan? There is massive megalithic stone structures in Japan. A lot of their very massive temples have got the base of their temples is megalithic in nature, like same, right? You know, the Romans built on top of Baalbek, blah 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 blah. In Japan, some of their temples, the base of their temples is megalithic in nature. There is entire big, massive, a lot of polygonal masonry in Japan as well, man. That's another one of the places that has polygonal masonry. A lot of melted stone stuff, a little bit similar to South America in Japan.
That's right.
You know, and Japan, remembering Japan is a string of islands. Prior to the Great Cataclysm, Japan would have been a much larger island as well. I don't know whether it would connect to the mainland. I'm not sure about that because I think the Marianas Trench is there or thereabouts. But Japan once upon a time would have been a much larger set of islands.
And you have the Yonaguni underwater monument there too. That they've never there is this underwater fortress off of is it off? Yeah, it is off Japan.
It's off Japan.
Yonaguni.
Yeah.
Or is it off Okinawa? I forget. But still, it's there, and that means the sea level was at one time a lot lower, and there might have been a connection to that too. There's some huge rocks there. There's this one, I forget what it's called, but it's got almost like a hollow inside on the top.
Yes. It looks like there's one that looks like Japan's the one. I think that might be the same one. It almost looks like some sort of ship or spaceship or something like that. It's got steps out of it. It's got a hollow in the middle, and it's one piece.
That's it.
and
That's
it's
the
all
one.
carved perfectly. Yeah, that's in Japan as well, isn't it? So again, echoes, right?
Yep.
And comes back to the multiple arc theory, right? I mean,
Yeah,
what
they were stolen
was,
from
yeah,
Egypt in from different places. It could be there could be multiple ones in multiple places. I mean,
mm,
Mount Nebo. This is where Moses saw the promised land and was supposedly buried. And according to the book of Maccabees in the Bible, the prophet Jeremiah acted on instruction from God to hide the ark in the mountain from where Moses saw the promised land. He found a cave, hid it, and there sealed the entrance. So there's another possibility, Mount Nebo, which I
mm.
guess is probably in Israel, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Mount Nebo. I know
Yeah.
there's one down here. We got Mount Nebo down the road. So I don't
Oh,
know
do
if
you?
it's, yeah. It's a wicked
Maybe
mountain
it's
road.
there. I
It's a
mean,
wicked
that's
mountain road. You want to take your car for a cool drive along a mountain road. That's Mount Nebo's really good. But yeah, we got a Mount Nebo down here.
you never know.
Well, I mean, I had a bit of a thought when you were just talking then about multiple arcs, right?
Yeah.
So one of the theories that we sort of both subscribe to is that once upon a time there seems to have been some sort of universal culture that existed on the planet, right? A universal understanding, universal spiritual and scientific understanding, which allowed us to build these megalithic temples. I think that's part of the theory that I like, and I know you don't disagree with that. What
No.
if, what if the parents of this culture, whoever they are, whatever they are, gave us power sources, right? And obviously, when the cataclysm happened, I imagine a percentage of those power sources were destroyed, and then there was only a few left, right? And that's what we're
Yeah.
seeing. That's what we're seeing here. Okay, this is the leftover power sources. One of the boys described it a few years ago as like how in every single one of these megalithic cultures, the building techniques get worse. Yeah, sorry, they get better the deeper we dig, right? So they had more
Yeah.
technology and ability to do it the deeper we dig.
That's
The
right.
more modern the building techniques, the worse it is. And I think one of the boys described it early on as like was Angus. He's like, so what if it's like an iPad, right? And you've got a solar charger for your iPad. The iPad's only going to work for X amount of time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That has all the schematics and all the drawings and whatever else you need. And it's the same with any sort of piece of technology. How long did it actually last before it begun to fail? I mean, you go back to the Sumerian texts and the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and there's all these, the gods you would travel in a ship across the sky and trailing smoke and all these sorts of things, right? I mean, it is, as I say, myth, religion, and fiction and truth are all separate things, and which of these myths is wrapped up in truth and which of these is fiction is an interesting question.
It is an interesting question, and it's hard to know where to draw the line, but I feel like this is an important story that has been echoed throughout, and a lot of this could be brought back before the cataclysm because
Mm.
we're looking at, like we mentioned in the very beginning, Moses could be Akhenaten. And if Akhenaten was around before the flood, then these stories are pre-flood. This is
Mm.
all the world that we don't know. The world like the Egyptians have they have a world where the gods walk the earth, Zep Tepi,
That's
and
right. Yep.
and the Sumerian tablets go way back too. So we're talking about pre-flood, where it seems that we lived in an entirely different world, entirely different. So, like these magical things happened then that we have no connection to now. It's like something happened, the cataclysm, and now we don't even know. And people live longer if they were people, if they
Yeah,
were
that's right. Yeah,
Homo
yeah.
sapiens sapiens.
Mm.
So there's something about that time period, this golden era. It was considered the golden era by many researchers, whether
Reflected
it's
upon,
Egypt.
it's reflected upon now as you say, Zep Tepi, the time of the gods, the Sumerian
Yeah,
gods. It was the time when everything was great, whatever.
yeah,
That's how it's reflected upon in these things. Yeah, it's and there's another interesting, Akhenaten, right? Was Moses Akhenaten was were these people survivors of the cataclysm, right? Were they these advanced beings, for want of a better description, survivors of this cataclysm? And part of all this story that we keep trying to reveal is them sharing whatever knowledge was left. You know what I mean? Giving us whatever knowledge they had, but they had to do it through religion, myth, and story in order for us to believe it. I suppose. I don't know. It's weird, man. Because it's like, on one hand, a lot of these stories, some of them don't seem to be true, but then on the other hand, you look into a lot of these stories and you start looking at the megalithic stuff and joining. It's only once you sort of reach the level of research that we're at, Leumas, and we have to sort of recognize that we're not even 35 anymore, mate. You know what I mean? So we've sort of been at this for a little while.
Yeah.
That you start to see the joiners, right? So I mean, 10 years ago we couldn't have joined Japan to Egypt to Samaria to Israel but you can. To South America, right? You can through the megalithic stuff, through the polygonal masonry, through the stories, through the myths. It's actually all the same, right? And I wonder how many other cultures have a magical box, man.
Well, there's a couple here. Let me just finish off with this part anyway. Antakya, Turkey. I'm probably not saying that right, but according to the Shia, a sect of Islam, the Hadith states the Mahdi, an Islamic Messiah-like figure, will appear in the end times and will bring forth the Ark from a place called Antioch.
Antioch, yeah. Yep.
And in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe, there's a random Jewish culture, just like in Ethiopia, and there's a famous religious artifact was in their possession called the Nyamya Lungundi, which translates into the drum that thunders. Their belief states that this is a replica made from the one and only Ark of the Covenant 700 years back. So I mean, you do have some leads here, but
yeah,
I don't know where to take those, but it's just interesting where it could be, or multiple arcs could be. And again, it goes back to this bigger picture. We're looking at a time that we have been quarantined. There's been an ancient cover up. They don't want us to know. Absolutely. But somebody here knows. Somebody on this planet, multiple high initiates know of something we don't. And I think that's where we run into a wall and all these mysteries.
Yeah, we do. I actually just thought about something, and I've got it. So I've been flicking through. So I did prior to the chaos of the pandemic, I was going to start doing some conferences down under, and I still might. And that's one of my goals for this year. And I put a slideshow together called Megalithomania 2. Okay, so if we're going to connect loosely megalithic cultures to arcs to power boxes so we're gonna make that connection. Now I need to take a deep breath. I actually might have a quick drink, right?
Go for it. Yeah, that's good. You're gonna do some seminars, some I've wanted to do that myself. Yeah,
I've said it now. So
you put it in the universe.
I put it in the universe.
It's out there.
Well, it's actually officially on the show now.
Okay, well, you got to do it. I'll join you somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, so deep breath. The megalithic sites, the countries for megalithic sites, right? Ready? Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Indonesia, Israel, Japan, Laos, Lebanon, Micronesia, South Korea, Syria, Tonga, Turkey, England, France, Germany, Spain, Australia, Bahamas, Costa Rica, Cuba, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, United States, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Greece, Ireland, Malta, Netherlands, Russia, Scotland. Add Italy to that list. Add Japan to that. Oh, Japan's already there. It's everywhere, man.
Right? Easter Island, did you get there?
No, I didn't get Easter Island. That's another one that needs to be added to the list. This is old notes, right? But I just found this the other day, and I thought this was the first list. I think the slideshow's got a bigger list, but just to grasp this megalithic culture, this culture that had understanding of the things that we're talking about, because it does all come back to that, man. It comes back to this comes back to this race, this advanced race that we once were, or that's how many countries around the globe that it is. It's practically every single one, right? It's
Yeah.
add Hawaii to that list. I know there's stuff, there's some. Didn't you find some stuff on the island?
Well, I think I found an ancient pyramid, but I have to go back, and it's in a sketchy place where if I leave my car, I might not have a car again. So I've been kind of thinking like I need to go with the right people and actually climb it. I got some video, and it's like, yes. So for my listeners out there, expect sometime in the next summer or something, I'm gonna climb that thing and figure out if it's a pyramid or not. But it very well could be. We don't have a lot of that stuff here, but just to think that it's been on Easter Island, one of the most isolated inhabited islands in the world, they even have megalithics there. It's just like they're everywhere. Yeah.
So I don't know whether I've told you this. However, on Easter Island, right? So there's all the statues on Easter Island.
Yeah.
Every single one of them is facing in towards the island, apart from the 7, the 7 that you see.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you draw a straight line from those 7 statues due west, they are staring directly at where Australia's Stonehenge once stood.
Oh, wow.
And Australia's Stonehenge predates any other Stonehenge that was ever known. However, it was bulldozed in 1946.
Those fuckers.
Yeah. 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 But that's those 7 statues are staring directly at what would have been known as Australia's Stonehenge, which is, another one of those ones, man. I was just trying to see if I had a. Just trying to see if this isn't the best photo, but there's a better one. But this is one of the renditions. The problem with too many research folders, that is not a good rendition, but that's an earlier computer rendition of the survey documents that were taken in 1938. Okay. That's a good friend of mine, Richard. He actually discovered the documents, like Indiana Jones, back in 2014. And this is one of his first computer generated models of the Stonehenge, but that's not a good one. There's a lot better ones of that now. And
what part of Australia is this in?
Mullumbimby.
Mullumbimby.
Yeah. In
Queensland.
No, New South Wales. New South Wales.
Is that New South Wales?
Yeah, about 2.5 hours south of me.
Okay.
Just trying to Here we go. This is the better version. Hang on. No mistakes, everybody. No mistakes. Here is the actual this is the actual survey documents. Photocopies of the survey documents that were made. Each of these coloured stones, the reds, the greens, the blues, are all crystal, man. Big, massive crystal pillars. Okay. Now, see this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Those 7 stones are staring at the 7 sisters of Easter Island. No shit.
That's pretty cool.
It's crazy, man. Crazy.
Yeah. So this is like an exact measurement to
you can
Mullumbimby to
if you go the middle statue at Easter Island, you go due west, it's staring directly at this.
Well, that is my next megalithic expedition. I'm going to go to Easter Island whenever they clear their vaccine passport.
Are they still?
Ugh.
Oh man, look.
In 2023,
I'm hoping that look, man. I would really love Leumas for the coins of the realm to release us and give us some bounty. So me and you, man, we need to go. You need to come down here. We need enough resources to go on a research trip for about 6 months and just put our boots on the ground with some of this stuff, man. You know what I mean? Like that's the. Because I can only imagine our interpretations once we actually put our feet on the ground there, Yeah, it's interesting stuff, dude. Was there anything else you wanted to cover off, mate? Anything else you want to chat about before we log off today?
I think we've covered it. I mean, like we said at the beginning, there's only so far you can go with this, but what a bunch of interesting little links that link to other things as you go along. So you can see like you can connect a lot of this. It's not just one story in the Bible. There's just so much more to this. So I even just going over this information out loud with you, it just like sparked a bunch of things in my brain.
Absolutely.
So
Me too.
I
That's
hope
what I
it
love
does
about
that to the
I love that about our conversations, Loomis. I love
yes.
that.
Yeah, me too. That. And so I hope that listeners get the same thing from it too. That it's like, oh wow, there's all these connections, because it really is all connected. We're not really looking at a bunch of different stories all the time. We're actually looking at variations of the same story, or as we keep saying, echoes.
Echoes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, mate, thank you very much, man.
Hey, thank you. Yeah,
it is echoes, too.
It's always a pleasure.
Always. Yeah, make sure you look after each other, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Cheers,
we'll see you again.
Just want to go again?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Go again.
All right. I know you been here before. No surprises settle the score. I know the darkness deep inside. Reckless rage, poison pride. I know the anger, I know the pain, and I know the fear we do not name. And the one who comes to find me when my time is through, I know you, I know you. Wow! I know you. Better.